Hello. All right, let's start. Oh yeah, we're meeting today. So welcome to our meeting. Um, this week we had two meetings aside from this one. We had the DevoWorm meeting and the cybernetics meeting. Cybernetics meeting, we finished up the Michael Levin paper on memory, which was, or I guess we continued with it. I don't know if we're actually finished. I think we are finished with it. And that was where he talked a lot about memory encoding and had his own takes on what he called diverse intelligences. So, beyond the sort of standard metaphors and models of memory encoding, talking about how memory is distributed and how you can think about memory as this bow tie mechanism between two network modules. So that was interesting. We tied it a little bit to cybernetics, but that's something that if we want to tie it more to cybernetics, that would be good. And then the DevoWorm meeting was good. We talked about a number of different articles in that meeting. And so that was our meeting schedule for this week. We're going to be taking a break probably for the holiday soon. I think maybe we'll have one more meeting this year, Saturday meeting, and probably one more week of meetings, maybe like DevoWorm. We'll have two more DevoWorm or something like that before the end of the year. So, we're finishing up 2024. I think it was a good year. I think we did some interesting things. I'd like to do more in 2025. Everyone wants to do more in 2025, I guess, but we'll have to kind of think about the plans for that. I know Jesse posted on New York Celebration Women in Computing, so that's coming up. There are other conference opportunities coming up, like the Embodied Intelligence Conference. I don't know if there are any other opportunities. We'll have to be on the lookout for them. So I wanted to bring a couple things to people's attention. First is that if you're on Blue Sky, there is an Orthogonal Lab starter pack. That starter pack has personal accounts and some other accounts like lab accounts. I don't know if it allows me to put in starter packs of their own. So like we have starter packs that we'd like to, we put a couple starter packs in the Slack, but I don't think you can actually put starter packs in the starter pack. So it's, I think there are feeds and posts here. I think you can put feeds. Yeah, so if you know of anyone who should be in the starter pack, let me know. There's also this interesting article from, I guess this is Coalition S's blog. Coalition S is a blog about open science and open access. There's this initiative called Plan S, so that's their coalition. If you go to Plan S, they talk about what they're all about here. Open access is foundational to the scientific enterprise. They're basically against publication paywalls. And then no science should be locked behind paywalls. So Plan S has been developed whereby research funders will mandate that access to research publications that are generated through research grants that they allocate and must be fully and immediately open and cannot be monetized in any way. So basically it's the kind of, it's sort of having a mandate where if you give a research grant, the paper should be free and unlocked and it shouldn't be monetized. That's the idea behind Plan S. And so they kind of have their statement here. This is from 2018. So if you go back to this article, they talk about how Web of Science takes a step back. And so Web of Science is an indexing service of a company called Clarivate. and they've decided to remove eLife from its citation index, or citation cited index expanded, or CSIE, or SCIE. I'm sorry. And so this is, you know, this is bad for eLife because the people use these indices to sort of rank publications, rank journals. The whole enterprise of ranking, you might argue, is bad, but that's how a lot of people they use that as sort of a metric for quality, although they probably shouldn't for on various reasons. So the whole reason why they did this is because eLife has this open publishing approach that they've been using, where they publish a paper kind of as a preprint, then they have a peer review process that's transparent. The peer reviews get posted to the article stub, and then if the article passes peer review according to the criterion that are set out, then it becomes a publication. And so you have these preprints and publications. And even though it's noted that there's like this preprint aspect and this publication aspect, a lot of people have complained about it and about the quality of the work and things like that. So, it's hard to say whether that criticism is, legitimate in the sense that it's raising a real issue, or rather that it's like this proxy for, open access fights. And so that's kind of what they are talking about in this article. And Web of Science basically decided to exclude eLife. And it makes it tough to swallow since Web of Science is run by a publishing institution, or a for-profit publishing institution. So basically that's what they're talking about here. And this organization, Plan S, is all about keeping things open and profit-free, I guess, is the idea. And they think of profit as a conflict of interest. So they basically motivate this article by talking about the origins of eLife. So if we want to reap the full benefits of 21st century science, scholarly communication needs reform and innovation. That's why the Howard Hughes Medical Institute and like-minded research organizations are supporting new approaches of scientific publishing. eLife was founded in 2012 by the Max Planck Society, Wellcome, which is a British institution, and HHMI, which is an American institution. And eLife has been innovating ever since they started. And this new publication model, I think, is about 2 or 3 years old, so it hasn't been around that long. But it's proven to be, there have been some cases where they've had controversial papers, but that's true of every journal, and so they're about the record is there. So given this record of in its first major contribution, eLife improved peer review by embedding consultation among peer reviews into the process. Given this record, it is troubling that Web of Science recently decided to delist eLife from its major index, especially considering that its publicly stated criteria for journal evaluation include the requirement that published content must reflect adequate and effective peer review and/or editorial insight. Rather than helping move scholarly communication forward, Web of Science, by punishing a leader in the field, is in fact holding it back. So this is where, and this is one of the highlights, what makes Clarivate's decision so counterproductive is that other journals, which use the traditional and confidential peer review model, remain indexed in the Web of Science, even though some of the articles they publish also have inadequate or incomplete evidence. The difference is that they do not label these articles as such. So it's interesting that in the light of kind of how eLife views transparency, they're actually being hurt by that instead of not being transparent, and people thinking, well, that's of higher quality. It's really interesting how, we try to balance this sort of transparency in publication, transparency in the process, and how, people perceive quality. And it's really interesting because there is this issue of there's this tradition of not being able to publish negative results, and a phenomenon called the file drawer problem, which means that you publish only the best work from a body of research. And what that means is that all of the stuff that failed, or all the stuff that wasn't so consistent with your original hypotheses, get put in the file drawer. We don't know about those. We don't see those. We only see the best stuff. It's like we see the primrose path and not the whole body of work. And so in the interest of transparency, you might publish all of that. You might publish the negative results, and you might publish the sort of the file drawer contents. And, you have a decision to make as to whether that is of quality or not, even though it's really about giving us all of the information about, say, a certain approach or a certain hypothesis. So it seems like there is this sort of this countervailing force to being sort of radically open in terms of open access, which is that people have their own preconceived notions of what is quality, or what is the highest standards. And, by one set of standards, those are the highest standards. By another set of standards, it's incomplete. So it's just really interesting, this kind of, tension. So this is beyond pass-fail peer review. So traditional journals use the editorial decision to publish as the signal to their readers that the article has passed peer review in the journal's standard of sound science. So this signal to the readers is important, because that's what we're talking about. It's like signaling to the readers maybe the what the quality is. And it's interesting because, like I said, the quality, you can use a simple signal to tell people what the quality of the work is, but at the same time, that work can be highly polished and not tell the whole story. So that signal can be very, very quick, very cheap, or it can be a deeper sort of analysis of the entire body of work. And what we present as the signal maybe is really the key to successful open access. Before reading this article, I didn't really think about it that way, but it kind of came to me as I was reading and thinking about this problem. As a proxy, the decision to publish can only transmit one piece of information, and that is approval. In contrast, eLife uses editorial assignments produced collaboratively by eLife reviewers and published with the article as a proxy for the peer review process. So they have these multiple pieces of information that are giving you an assessment of the quality. And then, rather than being a one-dimensional stamp of approval, eLife editorial assessments summarize strengths and weaknesses and use standard terms to rank articles in 2 dimensions. Those 2 dimensions are significance and strength of evidence. So usually, if you take like Nature, say, for example, there would be a heavy emphasis on significance, or, like how interesting is the question that's being asked, or the topic. Sometimes if it's controversial, it gets into Nature, and if it's not so controversial, it might not get into Nature, which is an interesting thing, but that's aside from the significance dimension. And then the strength of evidence, which is the other dimension, is, how well do you make your argument? Do you use the right statistical tests? Do you use the right, do the right experiments? Reviewers are always asking for like new analysis, new experiments. It's because you want to sort of sharpen that strength of evidence or make it stronger. And so that's, really kind of what we're looking for. But the strength of evidence also includes all the file drawer stuff. And so if we, put that into the pot, our evidence may not be as strong, but it gives us a better assessment of the quality, or of the sort of the overall, allows us to assess the set of hypotheses or the approach in a better light. So that's kind of, this is the problem too, in terms of being open access. We could call it transparent access, where we want to really get this good set of signals to tell us what the quality of the work is. But we also want to get this set of signals that tells us how plausible is what people are proposing in their paper. So then they talk about, in a lot of publishing, the rank standard terms for strength of evidence ranges from inadequate and incomplete at the low end to compelling and exceptional at the high end. Usually when you do a peer review, you're often asked, what is the strength of this paper? Are the experimental methods inadequate to, complete? Or is the approach incomplete to exceptional? Or, they usually give you this sort of range of options to choose from. So that's what we usually rank the paper on. And it's, maybe that's not the way to do that, but that's, I think, a very to the point or sharp metric for an editor to look at that and say, okay, that's basically what I thought, or, that's what our experts in the field think. So, as a result, eLife does occasionally publish articles that eLife reviewers judge and mark as having inadequate or incomplete evidence after final revision. So this isn't where you just get the preprint version, you get the final version. So it's like after the reviews and after the editorial consideration. So that can happen, but that can happen in any publishing model. Because remember, we're just taking like a small piece of the evidence. We're taking like maybe 2 or 3 people to put eyes on the paper, and anything that gets out there will be judged more widely after it's been accepted and the stamp of approval has been put on it. So it's always a problem. We can't have 1,000 peer reviewers. I mean, actually we can if we do open peer review. But oftentimes if we had 1,000 peer reviewers, we wouldn't get any stronger signal than we would from 2 or 3 people. So, that problem can happen where you have these kind of false positives, where you have something that's accepted for publication and you put that stamp of approval on it, but then it becomes clear after a while that this is an adequate or incomplete approach, or that the evidence is inadequate or incomplete. So this is always a problem in every journal, and they don't talk about in terms of false positives, but that's basically what it is. It's a false positive of the peer review system. So this is always a problem in journals, and the idea is to minimize that fraction. And there's no evidence that any one publishing model does that any better than any other. And it's just a fact of life. And so eLife's model thus makes visible a reality of scientific publishing that is currently invisible. So it's not that they're uncovering, like they're kind of uncovering this sort of flaw in the whole process. It's not that they're actually encouraging bad behavior. I guess that's the kind of the idea here. And so, this is a problem where you sometimes publish articles with incomplete or inadequate evidence. And how does this happen? This happens because, you don't have all the information a lot of times. You only have like 2 or 3 people who put their eyes on the paper before it's approved. So, oftentimes those people don't go through like data sets to make sure that they're consistent, or, they don't really actually try to replicate the study. And you just kind of look at it and you say, what is this good enough to be published? Does this look right? Okay, if it looks right, then it's okay. And so we don't actually go through like a replication, or we don't actually go through the excruciating details of the study. We usually go through the summary, and that's how that can happen. Given that that's the case, though, I think their false positive rate is actually quite low across the board. Like, you think of a false positive as something that has to be corrected or retracted. Those are very, relatively rare. So I don't think it's really that big of a problem in general. Sometimes, you get people who intentionally commit fraud, but that is rare. And it's also very hard to really kind of get at it first pass. So, okay, so then they have this last part here. Journals that conduct peer review in the open or ensure transfer of prior peer review reports clearly advance adequate and effective peer review and should thus be rewarded. not punished by indexers. So, what we're talking about here is that we have publishers like eLife, we have authors who submit papers, we have reviewers who review papers, we have editors who sort of marshal reviewers and make a final decision, and then we have our indexers who index those journals to make sure people can find them. People can, in like a tool like Web of Science, or that they have some sort of, they have sort of a formal record of it. So this is where this whole chain exists, and we usually think about open access as like just the journal level or the preprint level, but it's actually all of those pieces together. So this is, they're just making, this is an opinion piece largely. This is where, they look at this as, a potential career threat where a journal isn't indexed or it's not given a impact factor, and so then it's not viewed as being an equivalent venue for publication, and it can affect people in terms of tenures and promotions and other things. Last statement here. Unfortunately, the decision by Clarivate to delist eLife from SCIE is a barrier to a future where the inevitable errors of authors, peer reviewers, and editors can be effectively corrected through expert input that everyone can see and benefit from. Well, that's a little bit about open access and a little bit about our lab's new social media presence or I guess continuing social media presence. So I don't know if we wanted to do updates. Jesse, did you want to do an update?
Sorry, excuse me. I'll say a few things. I mostly have things to tease out a bit and not anything concrete. At large, I am basically finishing up my second to last term for my program, so that's where I am, and it's going okay. I'm very much looking forward to kind of a quiet period to sort out a lot of things. I think the most relevant thing I can say is I would really like to, I don't know if it will be have a meeting, but schedule some intentional discussion in the next few weeks. I know we might not meet, and I know we have other things to do, but I'd like to really sort out certain things in terms of project management or projects to pursue coming January. Ahead of January, I'd like to have stuff in place to invite people to and to do that. So I don't really know what that would be, and I don't know if we're going to have another cybernetics meeting. I know managers like that, and I know we've people here too. But I think setting some goal for that would be good. Like, I don't know, we have a whole lot of things going on, so I don't really know when to say that, but maybe some Friday noon time or some other time. Because I mean, we can talk about some things now, but I think I'd like to also have a kind of maybe it can be something where like we essentially I'll do a lab manager thing of kind of saying, hey, why don't we think about XYZ and come back later, and then come back with thoughts about it, and then we make decisions about it. And what to be more concrete than that, there's I guess my chat didn't say because I had to come back in here, but there's 3 things on the docket right now. The NICWIC submissions that are due in about 10 days. We should figure out what to do with that. We Robot, I might submit a poster of that, which is due in January. and the Embodied Intelligence Conference, which I think is just sort of openly accepting. Their breakout sessions are sort of, it's kind of rolling invitation to that or whatever. So those are three core things that we should make decisions about. I know Barley messaged me. He's going to say, "Oh, do you want to do this for NICWIC or not?" And in terms of NICWIC, the short answer of that is maybe. I may also suggest sort of, they have a different kind of submission this time for workshops, which fit really well with a lot of things we've been talking about. Basically, what I did for the other active inference stuff, and what I've kind of been doing some writings that I'll release soon about that. But just in that space of sort of management or leader, I don't really know what to call it. I actually like the word navigation, like facilitating navigation or navigating through this stuff. But in conventional terms, would be leadership for research or leadership and management for research and innovation. That's something that could be quite at hand there, and had a positive. When I mentioned it internally, people were excited about that as a possibility. Other than that, I am doing a lot of recalibrating of some of my aims and efforts and thinking about what I want to be doing in the next year ahead, because the next year I will hopefully be graduating from my degree program, and then it's sort of like, what's next after some of that? I know this year has been a little bit slower, largely because of grad school and the things I've been doing. So as I come out of that, where are things going? Where are things going with the lab directly, with JoPro, with Plot Twisters, which has sort of been in its own state of being. With that in mind, or the only other thing I concretely have to say is JoPro. It's basically, I submitted the application through me, but it's basically through me and JoPro. We have a small grant award, which is about, I'll give more details later, but it's essentially kind of a smaller opportunity. But what the submission was basically around sort of civic engagement, but sort of being a little more future minded or future oriented about it. So what I proposed for this submission, and was accepted, what we've been funded for in a small way, is essentially an applied frontier map kind of a deal. But it's, they're a little bit, civic engagement and frontier map don't exactly overlap at first glance. But what my pitch was basically, how do we sort of another take it might be like basics for like trajectory awareness in understanding how things develop. And yeah, it's more at an academic level. It's not like, I'm a bit agnostic right now if it's gonna. I don't think it's not really necessarily gonna be super policy, like governance oriented, but a bit more, dipping into some of the philosophy and some of the lenses. Like you have like, I mentioned recently, like the Foucault stuff, which is a very French critical theory, French post-structuralists, heavy philosophical stuff. But also, we've mentioned for a long time. We mentioned things like Kuhn and the Kuhnian system and of revolutions and normal science and pre-paradigmatic science and Popper and other people. So I'm kind of imagining a sort of basic synthesis of that. And what's interesting is that there'll be a little gamification of it, and making a little curriculum about it, and leading people through a sort of education of the program about that. To that end, I think there'd be some overlap with plot twisters there, if people want to do it there. I know there's some kind of the answer is yes, but we haven't talked about everything. And there's also a few other people that I've met at the Inclusive Gaming Conference that I've started reaching out to. One of them actually has expressed some interest. So I'm being a little bit vague on purpose, but in the next week or so, I'll kind of reveal directly um, things a bit more. But suffice to say, that will be something that we do in the next year. Like that'll be sort of a spring semester deal into summer, perhaps. So we have that sort of, I don't know what to call it, applied frontier map project, let's say. We have NICWIC, we have Embodied Intelligence Workshop, we have We Robot. I really 100% want to submit something to We Robot for a variety of reasons. But I'm sort of least sure about what that will be right now. And I'm going to do a little more, I might do sort of a call for ideas internally, just to kind of remind people, hey, we can do this and let's talk about this. And I'll say like, I'm going to, host a discussion about it or something in the next time. Because I know it's sort of, we're entering the weird period where everybody has finals and holidays and gets sick. And like, this is like the dead zone of a lot of things. But I'm still going to try to do some things that I'll just say, hey, I'm going to talk about this at this time and go that way. But yeah, NICWIC, Embodied Intelligence, We Robot, Applied Frontier Map. And there's still the other fellowship that Jen and I have worked on that we'll hear back from, I think, next week, which could lead to sort of a mental health working group related project that's been a little bit radio silent, but I think it's just because they internally have been, sorting things out. But that's still a thing too. It could happen, it could not. I have no real idea. Yeah, so those are sort of the, I guess, 5 large things on my radar in terms of administration and pursuing things. There's a number of other things, but there's a few other things too. We kind of have to do a little bit of a little bit of promotional work to remind the outside world, especially that are, I think some of the, people of shifting to blue sky. We don't really have, we don't, the lab doesn't have, we don't really even do emails anymore, do we? Because I'm not getting
we
emails,
don't.
but like,
We don't.
we don't really promote a lot to the outside. So I think now that there's a big shift from Twitter, kind of have to remind people, yes, we're going to be doing X, Y, Z. So I think we're going to have to kind of choose a few to highlight at some point, whether it's the cybernetic stuff, which is a lot going on, and we could do a whole thing on like physical memory and the 11 stuff and cybernetics. There's also a big, like, my complexity thing I keep talking about with Krakauer's vision of complexity. That is, I've been a bit waylaid on pursuing anything with because of the timing of the year that I'm in. But that's something that I'd love to have people or interns or external collaborators on, because that's a big question that I have. And I've looked into trying to do something with the Santa Fe group itself. I also looked at the New England Complex Science Institute, which is closer to where I am, but it's not quite the same as the SFI, let's say.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. I don't. Yeah. So I mean, I'll I will turn the mic back to you, Bradley, about this, but sort of there's sort of 5 specific tasks that I've mentioned, and then these things like the complexity stuff, like the cybernetics, like the physical memory, like the Brain-Derived vehicle stuff. Like there's been a little bit of more talk about that, and I'd like to do. I still have an interest in sort of making this computate like sort of representational brains and phenotypes, but like simulation focused, like a I don't know, like a more of a hub directly about computer simulations and maybe agent-based modeling, maybe not, but things of that nature. Um, Seems like it's something that's a low-hanging fruit that we could easily, develop a bit more. But I'm curious of your thoughts about all those things.
Yeah, so I think that's good. You touched on a lot of things with project management. So yeah, we need to do like a recap of this year and kind of a assessment of next year and where we stand. I was going through some of the structure of the lab, thinking about the different things that we've done, or like kind of what the structure of the projects are, which are of course always shifting. So we have, open source. We have, I guess we call it representational brains and phenotypes, which includes Brain-Derived vehicles, embodied models, those kind of simulations, agent-based simulations. Then that feeds back to open source, where we do a lot of the stuff with open source sustainability and those kinds of agent-based models. And we have reinforcement learning and some machine learning that straddles those two as well. We have our sort of our society, ethics, and technology, which incorporates a lot of that, plus, ethics work, so social science, some humanities. And then what else do we have? We have other things that we haven't touched on in a while. The PHASIC project, which is sort of physical intelligence and VR and, kind of that intersection. We do the stuff with cognition futures and, of course, cybernetics. Cybernetics has been active recently. It was kind of morbid for a while, and now it's become more active. Certainly in the last part of this year, we've been really kind of focusing on that. So, that's one of the things about the lab is we shift to different projects, we shift to different things that we're doing, and then they kind of fit into projects. And then over time, the projects shift to respond to what we're doing. So, if we take a new direction or we do some work in a certain area of that project domain, then, that's where we are. So it's really kind of, and this is true, I think, in any lab where you have this sort of evolution of sort of goal. We have these goals, overarching goals, and then we have this evolution of interest, which is to say that, you don't, when you make a bunch of project silos, and this holds true for like fields of study, those are kind of like high level descriptors, and we don't try to like match that as much as possible. We try to just do work on a day-to-day basis or a quarterly basis, and that's really where everything happens, right? Like you can't really plan 5 years ahead and say this is exactly what we're going to do. I mean, you can if you have like a long-term grant, but a lot of times even then, you have to go with what works, have to go with what's the path of least resistance, and you don't know that necessarily 5 years out. So unless it's a really, really you know, top-down driven project, like if it were like a, something like a project at NASA or something, you're not going to have that luxury of conforming to the project descriptions. So we'll be doing this day-to-day stuff, and it'll shift our projects, and so that's a project management challenge. But I think, continually reassessing where we are in that is good. And I've been doing some of that on my own, and you've been doing some of that. So we should definitely get together on that. We do keep in touch on that, but it's like just kind of giving I think, a more critical assessment of that at the end of the year. I don't know if I may do a video on what we did this year, like a yearly report. I might try to do that over the break when we're not doing meetings. I have to get the stuff together, and I'm always amazed every year, when I do that, the many things that we've done.
Yeah.
Like if I were to try to tell you off the top of my head what we did, I'd probably miss like half of it. And so I know we haven't been as active as in years past, but we still have to kind of summarize that. And when you summarize it, it's more impressive. Yeah, this about getting our work out or getting the word out about what we're doing is, we do a lot of YouTube stuff now instead of like a newsletter. I used to do a weekly newsletter, which was like, oh, come to our meeting, which is not really that productive. I stopped doing that because I don't know how many people wanted to hear about it every week. We could start doing like a regular blog post or something, recapping some of our activities. Certainly, a quarterly kind of report would be good. Or a monthly report, but that again requires someone to do that. I don't necessarily have time for that, but it's something that's worthwhile. And then this sort of reaching out to other institutes. Yeah, that would be good to do. Again, it's kind of hard to get collaborations going, and if you talk to Santa Fe, they usually want to have a collaboration, or I've not noticed that they've been particularly open to people just doing stuff. So that's something that might work out, might not. But yeah, I think we're always trying to find ways to highlight what we're doing, and it might be good to have, like, if we could figure out a way to do it that's like low maintenance, that would get the word out about what we're doing on a regular basis. That would be good. We could use like something like conventional social media to put it out there. We could use like a blog post. We could do other things. I like, making a video as well, but that's all kind of, that takes time. It takes someone to kind of stick with it, because we don't want to just do it a couple times and then forget about it. Yeah, so that's good. And then there are some of these moving projects that, again, we have all these things going on, that like educational stuff that we need to kind of update people on. So yeah. So it looks like Morgan wants to say something.
Well, I was just I was just going to say that Daniel Friedman is the master of this.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, which is not to say, I mean, to your point, like it is work, but it is, it's also just about like kind of changing practices, like, just how he's taking notes like during every meeting,
Right.
And that kind of document can then be sent out once a month. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just, sorry, I we had a Neurotech X board meeting, and I was just I was noting the difference between that board meeting and the Celsius board meeting, and I was just like, this isn't how you really do board meetings. And and that, yeah. Anyway,
Oh,
If it was, like if it was important to get out something once a month, you know, we could just try and structure this bit different, or you know, etc. Like, you know, I mean, I don't know if you, when you're taking notes, does that go into a document, or yeah, and
yeah.
then like, the way that people try and do, or well, again, Daniel's the person I would look to for inspiration, and just in terms of like, um, it always seems like he's contributing to a living document. Yeah,
Yeah, he's
like you, yeah,
he's definitely a believer in Coda. So it's like this platform.
right,
Yeah. So
right, and anyway, but and I just wanted to also add, like, if there is a group that I really wanted to, try and have a um, more of a relationship with, it would definitely be Active Inference Institute. I mean, one, I just thought that the symposium was really cool, and yeah, and two, like, they well, just a lot of things about how they do things are impressive too, and like I was saying, like, you know I think it's basically, I'd like to be more like Daniel.
yeah. Yeah, he's good
It's
at
good.
that. Yeah. He was doing, and I had forgotten about this. He was doing a thing with Santa Fe over the pandemic, where he did
Oh,
these,
really?
yeah, it's live streams,
Okay.
and yeah, they're
Okay.
interesting. I don't know if they're still online somewhere, but yeah. And then he,
Okay.
of course, he's doing active inference. Yeah, he does, like, and so to answer Jesse's question from the chat, which was, what are the tools? So, or the Daniel uses something called Coda.io, which
Yeah.
is like an interactive sort of it's a database. It's not quite like Notion, but you get like, it's note taking based, and you can create docs, and then the docs are in this kind of space where you can share them with people. They can collaboratively edit and so forth. All right, so I have this archive of notes and meetings here. This is like, I mean, this isn't as disordered. It's a README in this folder, so link to the README. But this is basically an archive of Saturday morning meetings from like August 2020 to now. So each one of these links go to like a stub. And like, so for November 2, we have like a Mastodon thread, a meeting recording, and then notes. And they're kind of like, you know, basically all the notes I take. So they're kind of organized like that. We have, I think, I've always wanted to do like YouTube, like we have the YouTube videos, and we maybe need more annotation of that, where we go get things out of them, and and there's that. We've done like a lot of blog posts where we've basically gone through the YouTube videos and found parts of it, and kind of put together timestamp links to pieces of content. So there's a lot that can be done, and some of it is just a matter of like finding a process, and then finding people who are interested in, like, you know, what did we talk about in this meeting or that meeting, going back and getting stuff, and synthesizing things. That's something too that I think would be good for these kind of updates. So if you recall, I did post a update on the ACT Symposium. So this is a kind of a recap of the symposium, the live streams, and our videos that we contributed materials here. And I have this on a playlist on our YouTube channel. So we have all these talks. This is Stefan Bowman. This is, I think, Jesse. This is the talk on open source and open science, and this is the cybernetics talk. So we have that recap. And then we, of course, have some other recaps that we've done before. We have like the GSOC stuff. We have, Jesse provided some posts on some topics here. We have news. We have our recaps. This is a NICWIC recap from 2023. This is one from, we have the Saturday morning NeuroSim conversations. So this one was on, can't remember what this one was on. This was on, I think, data ethics and some other topics. We have, of course, the ones on physical intelligence, which are pretty far back now. And we have some more conference recaps. So we're doing things on the blog of different types. We're doing conference recaps, topical recaps, active participation like Google Summer of Code, and then some of these other types of posts where we're kind of talking about a deep dive into a topic. So that stuff, we don't necessarily know who's paying attention to that. So it's like, we can put it on social media, but it's hard to know who's seeing what. And, we could try different ways of doing that. We could try like recapping all of that in a newsletter, sending it out to people. And then again, who's on the mailing list, who's getting it. A lot of ways to go here.
And like you said, it's always interesting to recap because, your memory of things and what actually happens don't always line up.
Yeah.
Are no one-to-one guys. I keep saying that's the kids. it's yeah. So it is a really useful endeavor.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you're reminded of these things, and I wanted to add just maybe a good point to talk about somebody reached out and started an organoid intelligence Slack and GitHub and seems to be I'm not familiar with this company Elevate Bio, but they seem to be a pretty big Boston-based organization, and it's not affiliated with the company. He's just an engineer there, but it was nice because I see multiple people from both. I mean, so like Thomas Harding, there are people from Johns Hopkins who were co-authors, or in the case of Harding, last author on the organoid intelligence paper, and people like Fred Jordan, who's I don't know if he's CEO or C-suite, I think is the term, from Final Spark. So this is the Swiss organoid intelligence company, and it's the one that I think is probably more Cortical Labs is the company who had the dish brain paper, right? But I think they've been kind of limited by the fact that because they're a startup that have to basically, the way they got their funding, they need to come out with a product very quickly, and I think it's limited the scope of their work. Final Spark is a passion project of the executives of another company, and that's a spin-off of like an INRIA or CEA. It's like a French National Science Foundation kind of place. So they've got this successful multinational business, but what they really want to work on is growing brains and connecting them to computers, right? So it's just like I think it's one of those cases where it's just interesting how, they're both companies, but they have very different kind of visions and development timelines or development priorities, let's say, right?
Yeah.
So it's yeah, I think anyway, but you get what I'm saying. Like the it's something we did a TFUS, Transcranial Focused Ultrasound Society meeting that I do with Neurotech X, and we talked a lot about different, the kind of bringing products to market issues with Neurotech, and I would say like organoid intelligence, like so much more difficult because of course I'm not sure anybody knows what I'm not sure anybody knows what they're doing yet.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, I would I would like to see us in 2025, or I should use I statements. I would like to not post things on Slack in 2025 unless unless I've got them all well documented in some other location that is a more permanent record. And go ahead.
We do have our Discord, and I've been trying to narrow things to Discord.
I mean, I should take my own advice in terms of I want to what would Daniel Friedman do bracelet. And I don't think he would use like again like Coda or Notion seems to be what the kids at Neurotech at Berkeley like. I still don't know how this beats a text file, but anyway, like these just kind of reviewing reviewing these two key areas, organoids and computational psychiatry. And I've been really happy with progress this year. Like we'll be going into 2025 with two active projects with Neurotech at Berkeley. One's the ultrasound, and the other one, which they just asked about this week, was mentoring their kind of wet lab dish brain project. So the cool thing being that at least for now at least we've got some wet lab space, and and they've been the first group's already brought in like something like $25,000 in funding. So they got these are kind of obviously these are all smaller grants, like all less than like $10,000. But this is a project that they're doing in addition to their coursework, right? So this is I mean one of them's for like $10,000 of Amazon credits, but the full waveform inversion for the ultrasound is super computationally intensive. So that's actually kind of nice. I feel like we should be able to get them actual university credits or university compute time. But anyway, been very cool. And one of them is actually going to go to the this Tyler Cohen Emergent Ventures unconference in, I forget if it's March or January. I can check.
Yeah, so that's good. Thanks for the update.
I just wanted to add the computational psychiatry would I'd like to see more progress or projects associated with it. And I don't know if that makes sense with what Jesse's been talking about in terms of mental health. It might not be, doesn't sound like it's the exact focus, but yeah, would I thought it was really interesting that I forget if it's Barrett or Rust from is it Northeastern? Anyway, the person that we definitely know, psychologist writing kind of science communication work. Yeah, I'm blanking now whether it's no, not Daniela Ross, but anyway, I'll look it up. But she's going to go spend a sabbatical year with is it Yao? Is it Yao Niv? When it's Yael?
Yeah.
How do you pronounce that? Yao? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Who's one of the kind of, if you will, founders of computational psychiatry, or certainly in its kind of modern form. And so I thought that was really interesting that she chose that lab to kind of embed herself in and to learn from. I will dig it up before the end of the meeting in terms of who that is. And I think it just, no, not Grace. No. I like that, or certainly I feel like I've been able to catch up on what Grace Lindsay is doing because of her blue sky engagement.
Yeah.
So, but I feel like it's Barrett just because isn't Barrett the woman who originally got involved to solve like emotion detection?
Yeah, how emotions are made.
Yes. I think it's her, but I'll let me double check. And but again, it's I thought it was really it was someone where I was just like, that's great that she's choosing to go be with a real computational psychiatry lab. And again, it's not, there isn't, I was just gonna say that like what this also brought up for me was that there's no active inference institute for computational psychiatry.
Yeah.
In the same way. And you might say like you could even say like it is, like it would be a good sub project for active inference, right? Because to some degree, what is active inference except a kind of behavioral or this very close to kind of reinforcement learning. And I like again following like Alberta Plan kind of vision for reinforcement, for artificial intelligence development, just because it brings up a lot of great topics that could be really relevant to computational psychiatry without it being without the same without necessarily the same goals, right? Anyway, so I'll stop there, but I'll look it up, and that would just be the other thing. I think I'd love to see some something that is close to like the work that that was brought up at the Active Inference Symposium. That let me go say goodbye.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so that's kind of the point of Active Inference Institute, is to like kind of facilitate a lot of active inference type projects. Like there are a lot of people in the lab there who do, it's just kind of a variety of things that are all focused around active inference, applying active inference, and how to use that set of tools and theories to do things like that. So when we did the symposium, we had a lot of people doing their own kind of take on active inference. So, there's project management, business applications. There was, of course, the theoretical applications, and then the more sort of robotics-oriented applications. I don't know if they had anything on like psychiatry. I know there were some things on sort of behavior. They didn't really have a lot on behavior, like behavioral studies, given sort of what active inference is. But that's something I think that they might be interested in. Especially in that realm of computational psychiatry. So I've been thinking about, how we might kind of put our foot into that pool. And I'm still kind of interested in we could do a foundational paper, but I don't know if we have the clout for that. We could do like a vision paper, but I don't know what the value of that is. So it's like, how do we start? And it might be interesting to like do like what I might do, or what we might do together, is go back through the computational psychiatry materials. As I said, I've been mirroring them on our Discord server, and we have this long archive of stuff, and just kind of go through and like recap everything and kind of organize, like classify it, put that into like a paper form, and then put that out as a preprint, and then maybe look into like assess how active inference might fit into that. Like what are the active inference questions that might be relevant, and then use that maybe to facilitate some sort of collaboration. So that might be something of for 2025 that would be good. But yeah, I think we should try to move on that. And then I don't know how it fits into what Jesse and Jen are doing. If that's something that I'm sure that they would have something that they could contribute there as well.
Sorry, I was just running outside to
Yeah.
get them out the door.
Yeah.
My daughter's going to go see Taylor Swift.
Oh, okay.
Very, very important trip.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So yeah, we'll come back to that, and then we'll see. And I think we're all kind of interested in seeing what we can do here in the new year. So let me go to the sort of things that are happening this week. So as you may remember, NeuroSim happens in December. So NeuroSim is coming up this week, starting I think Tuesday. And they usually have a nice online component to that. I think they're in Vancouver this year, so that's the physical location. And then they have their online components. I know they're going to be on Blue Sky, for example. I know that they had said that they do that. They will be on YouTube with their videos. So why don't we... So I've got the NeuroSim site pulled up. This is for this year. It's Vancouver Convention Center, Tuesday through Sunday, this is they actually had this paper visualization with the main conference papers. So this actually is sort of a map of all the papers this year's NeuroSim. So they have these papers in the blue dots, and they're in these different spaces that overlap. So you have large language models here in this box. You have speech, which overlaps with that. You have multimodal large language models here. You have this graph category, which is graph neural networks. Federated learning over here. Adversarial robustness. Bandits, which are of course the like the one-armed bandits, the unarmed bandits. Reinforcement learning, of course, overlaps with that. Causal, biology, chemistry, time series. Those are kind of smaller categories. Alternative architectures. That's really interesting. A lot of like neuro-inspired stuff there. Spiking neural networks. Dynamic sensorium, competition. It's interesting. Recurrent neural network dynamical systems, flexible content-driven sensory processing, EEG to video, which is, where you take neuroimaging data and you try to like decode movies with it. And then neurovision to language. So that's all in alternative architectures. That overlaps with diffusion, which is, of course, the diffusion techniques. 3D reconstruction overlaps with that as well. 3D pose estimation, 3D object detection. So you have all these 3D methods. And then segmentation, which then goes back and overlaps with multimodal large language models. So that's really interesting, some of these categories and how they kind of overlap with one another. Nice visualization. Did you have anything to say about that, Morgan?
No. Excuse me. I was trying to track down that particular person that I was talking about. No, there's. I was also seeing that there's some neuromodulation papers that they're talking about in the TIFO Society group that we should catch at NeuroSim, and we haven't done our kind of what's our top 3 workshops we'd want to attend if we could. It's funny because they're my wife and daughter are heading up to Vancouver right now, but for Taylor Swift, not for NeuroSim. I would have liked to justify it as if they had been just a bit more overlapping and be like, sure, I'll go.
Yeah.
I was I'd said on the Organoid Intelligence Slack that we should be looking for interesting paper. So somebody was posting about a recent Hinton. I think the Vector Institute had an event. The Vector Institute in Toronto had an event that was recapping all the cool research at the Vector Institute, and he had something about biological intelligence replacing artificial intelligence or something like that, and it was a little like the organoid intelligence paper where it was a little aspirational, and it was just like, we could, everybody's focused on the energy demands of AI, right? Or certainly of artificial AI. And, and it's just like, okay, no chance is organoid intelligence going to be a good solution to the energy issues at this point.
Right?
Because it's just like, in so many other ways, you will be demanding much more expensive resources, other types of resources.
Yeah.
Right. And so I was just saying that, like, as cool as it is, and I do think that it's we always see certain things, right? Like I always want to see who are the developmental psychologists that are going to be speaking at NeuroSim, right? For that would be one, right? And then a number of kind of subtopics, like machine learning of medical imaging, or again, like we should, we can find our favorite workshop or something that's going on there too.
Yeah.
All right. But at the same time, like the people who are, fine tuning language models or things like that, like not really of interest, or like that's more, yeah, that's more just conventional AI work, right?
Yeah.
Or what people are calling
Yeah.
AI work. And yeah, so I was just saying, like, where exactly, what conferences would we draw from?
Yeah.
And again, it's one thing, like a topic like organoid intelligence, like there's probably not a conference at this point, but it would be little bits that were brought up at something, right?
Yeah.
So I was pointing out that Cold Spring Harbor has a meeting that's next week as well. I think it's also like 9th to the 12th, where it's 3D brain development and organoids, right? And of course, not everything at a meeting like that is necessarily relevant either, right? Because these are, we're not trying to do brain science. You're trying to do biological computational processing, and then transfer it back to a computer.
Yeah.
Right. So I, as an attempt to get, as an example of something, I was actually pointing to the recent announcements from science.xyz, which is this, or it's Science Corp, here in the Bay Area in Alameda, which is Max Hodak's company, who was one of the co-founders of Neuralink, and like most of them have left, and he's focused on these biohybrid electrodes, right? And at least there, you're thinking a lot about interface. You're thinking a lot about you're thinking about material design of the electrodes, and certainly of like nano fabrication, and you're thinking about very fine control of biology, of the cellular biology. And they've got an archive paper right now, and yeah, I mean, if it's of interest, I can put a whole bunch of links together, because there's a nice video. They brought a film team in as well to Science Corp, and covered what they were doing. Yeah. So
yeah, that would be good. Yeah.
But I think I would certainly be looking at NeurIPS for like computational psychiatry relevant papers, for instance.
Yeah.
Right. Like hopefully, but it's like perhaps even ones that are specifically focused on modeling behavior.
Right. So yeah, so if we go back to the visualization, this is for posters. So like, this classification's useful. I don't think they have it for papers, but anyways, that's one thing. And then of course, we also wanted to get to the posters, or that we wanted to get to the workshops, and to the let's see, where are we here? We have the schedule. Probably don't have to go through that right now. Tutorials and workshops is what I wanted to get to. So the tutorials are here. So we have, things on large language models, causality, evaluation. We have language model pipelines. Of course, there's a lot of this sort of stuff with language models. There's flow matching for generative modeling, which is interesting. This is abstract. Okay. Flow matching is a simple yet effective generative modeling paradigm. It is inspired by efficient training of diffusion models, but offers a similar perspective and enables easy implementation and generalization. So flow matching is basically regressing onto conditional velocities. So you're using diffusion models, you're modeling sort of the physics, you're modeling velocities. You regress onto conditional velocities that generate single data examples, and the result is a model that generates the full distribution. So this is where they kind of go into, this is pretty heavy sort of math and physics approach to this sort of model. I guess a machine learning model. You can adapt this to non-Euclidean geometries, build arbitrary Markov processes, etc. So that's an interesting new sort of newish technique. We have privacy, experimental design and analysis for AI researchers. That's kind of a newer area. I didn't, but this is still important to kind of figure out how to design experiments for things in, especially like not just benchmarking, but some of these other areas where you're kind of interfacing with scientific, experiments and discovery. Advancing data selection for foundation models, cross-disciplinary insights into alignment in humans and machines, generating programmatic solutions, algorithms and applications of programmatic reinforcement learning and code generation, some out of distribution stuff in a tutorial here where they talk about how we can use different techniques to like to get around some of these out of distribution problems. So as models grow in size and grow in scope, they end up encountering these out of distribution behaviors. So that's something to keep an eye on. Meta generation algorithms, and this one's sandbox for the black box, how large language models learn structured data. So those are the tutorials. Then the workshops are, we have new frontiers in adversarial machine learning. We have mathematical reasoning in AI. Language gamification, sounds interesting. Statistical frontiers in large language models and foundation models. AI for accelerated materials design. AI-driven speech, music, and sound generation. Attributing model behavior at scale, which sounds interesting, but basically it talks about how so we don't fully understand how the composition of training data sets influences model behavior, how to attribute capabilities to some components, and which algorithmic choices really drive performance. So this is what we call model behavior attribution, and they kind of talk about that here. We have unifying representations in neural models, table representation learning. I'm not sure what that is. Tables are a promising modality for representation learning and generative models with too much application potential to ignore. So this is tables like you'd find in a CSV file or a tabular file format. So it's interesting that they're talking about tables at NeuroSim, but that's what they're doing here. So there are a lot of things you can do with tables. Of course, you can take text data out of tables and the other things having to do with training sets. That's interesting. They have a neuro AI workshop using neuroscience and AI. Yeah.
Yeah. Gail Varquois, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, but anyway, has projects that specifically focused on data table issues. Okay. And they've got a new company, Probable. So it seems to be like a kind of commercialization of scikit-learn.
Okay.
It's like I think the core devs of scikit-learn were like, we deserve to get paid.
Yeah.
And anyway, so you'll see Probable's got videos out, and they seem to have a bit of a but talk a lot about data tables. I don't know why. I was just assuming that it's a lot of times that people have data tables, right?
Well, yeah, most people who attend the workshop want to know, like,
like, isn't that how everybody has their data structured?
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, it just seems like that was our 30 years ago was,
Right.
you got your data table, but anyway.
Well, yeah, it's a very practical problem. It's like, I have data here. How do I get it out?
Right. It's like a NeuroIPS workshop on doing statistics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't see anything specific to like computational psychiatry or even like behavioral stuff.
Well, like workshop on behavioral machine learning. Like,
Okay.
who's that? I mean, some of these, like, I wonder. Like, yeah, I don't recognize any of these people. I mean,
Yeah.
that doesn't, like, yeah, are they gonna say who we're?
Yeah, I think a lot of this is like,
It's also funny because, I mean, again, like, this is the conference where I met my advisor, right?
okay,
Or the person who ended up being my advisor, and this is such that was like 20 years ago,
right.
and look how many of those workshops seem like super focused on either generating large language models or dealing with internet scale data.
Yeah, it's
or internet data, right? Like,
yeah, it's definitely shifted. I think since 20 years ago, it used to be more
I mean,
about like,
still these will be all like absolutely excellent, technical presentations, right?
yeah,
I mean, sure.
so yeah,
Yeah, learning in the physical sciences, foundation models for science.
oh yeah,
But I mean, I've liked those. They depending on who's putting it together, it seems like they have a bit of a focus on, or some of them might have a focus on kind of like these like physics inspired neural networks,
yeah.
or physics informed, and I mean, what about the scientific methods for neural networks? Up just a row,
This
yeah.
one here.
Scientific methods for understanding neural networks.
Yeah,
Like, what's
looks like basically, while deep learning continues to achieve impressive results, our understanding of the principles underlying their successes remain largely limited. This is because we're approaching it from a mathematical point of view, and then they want to promote a complementary approach that is centered on the use of the scientific method. So hypotheses and controlled experiments to look at, like, it's basically testing alternate deep learning or machine learning models. The empirical analysis of deep networks, which can falsify existing theories or answer questions about the success or failure of the models. They don't say, like, I guess they have a workshop website, which is maybe a little bit more insightful. I don't know if you know any of these people. Oh, Surya Ganguly.
Oh yeah, okay.
And,
Yep, thank you.
And who else? I don't see anyone. Yeah, I mean, Andrew Sachs. So there are
Andrew
people.
Sachs, but I would be hard pressed. I mean, Ganguly, I can tell you about the kind of work. I can't think of what Sachs's work is focused on.
Yeah.
But
But yeah, so
I recognize the name. Yeah.
Right. And I guess debunking challenge, which is like the we host a challenge to interrogate commonly held beliefs in the deep learning community. So they want to debunk a lot of the
Oh, that's funny.
yeah,
That's
great. So that's like, they're doing a lot of interesting things. I don't see anything in like psychiatry or psychology. I do see stuff with biology.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
I was wondering though about something like I don't know if I mean causal representation learning. I mean, I'm just looking at a little bit for open world agents down there.
Open world.
Yeah, second to down on the bottom. Yeah, and then two in.
Oh, this one here. Yeah. Workshop
goes.
on open world agents. Yeah, that is.
Yeah,
So this is superhuman performance. Open world environments is the new habitat for AI agents. Highly diverse and dynamic, fully interactive, teaming up with infinite and creative tasks, and requiring continuing learning or continual learning and growth. So open agents, it's kind of like world models, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, but I definitely like the open in the sense of like open ended.
Yeah.
Potentially that's something. Again, that's the again, it's like what would Richard Sutton be looking for in this conference?
Yeah.
Like he's like, we've already said what would Daniel Friedman do?
Right.
It's
So Daniel Friedman and Rich Sutton. Got it.
Who are the other good people that you ask hypothetically on what they would do? Because there are plenty.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was already just talking about like Yalniv. Like who are the
Jan LeCun, what's his name? LeCun? Jan LeCun?
Well, he's he's engaged in he's building these internet scale models, right? So he's got hundreds of engineering challenges that he's thinking about that are all real. Like they're all real challenges, but they're not necessarily like of interest to computational psychiatry people. I'm just wondering, like, what are the computational psychiatrists looking for in this meeting? Like, what are the kind of the subtopics that would be of interest to them or would solve problems that they're thinking about?
Yeah, interesting stuff, and I appreciate that. I always imagined, sorry, I didn't mean to get digressive, but it's like thanks. Yeah.
I mean, in terms of other people.
Oh, I mean more so like I'm not even just like speaking like figuratively here. Like on some level, you have to imagine these researchers and their approaches and what they would have been looking for when they were publishing this work. So asking a question, for example, what would Friedman think? What would Friedman do? That's what it really comes down to. So yeah.
Right.
So one that I saw in here was the system two reasoning at scale. I don't know if this is kind of closer to thinking about the brain, although it's not like any sort of neuroscience. It's just kind of like system 2 from Mars system, or well, it's not Mars, but it's I think can't remember who proposed system 1 and system 2.
Is this like Kahneman?
Yeah, Kahneman. Yeah, right. Kahneman.
Okay.
So this is system 2, which is the sort of the reflection and thinking.
Thinking slow.
Thinking slow. So this is our workshop focuses on improving reasoning in neural networks, achieving system 2 reasoning and transformer-like models. The workshop addresses issues like distinguishing memorization from role-based learning, understanding syntactic generalization, and compositionality. So those are typical problems you encounter in sort of, kind of this reasoning or long-term planning and things like that. The workshop also covers the importance of understanding how systematic models are in decisions for AI safety, integrating neural networks with symbolic reasoning, and developing new architectures or enhanced reasoning capabilities. Yeah, that's one kind of approach to that. Yeah, and so yeah, they have like multimodal algorithmic reasoning. They have compositional learning. Let's see, any others? Intrinsically motivated open-ended learning, which looks interesting from the standpoint of like open-endedness.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is. I don't know if their website is a little bit more. Okay, there we go. This is just kind of how do we, as humans, develop broad and flexible repertoires of knowledge and skills? How can we design autonomous life learning machines with the same abilities? So this is based on like intrinsic motivated learning or curiosity driven learning. This is Pierre Odier in France at the Flowers lab, and Schmidt-Huber, of course, is cited here. So it's this intrinsic motivation, intrinsic drives have evolved in animals to drive exploratory behaviors, an essential component of efficient learning. Who's running this one? I wonder. Organizers. This is I don't recognize Brendan Lake actually, who published some really interesting papers on Pierre-Yves Odier, Daniel Polanyi.
Sure.
Yeah, a lot of people from that kind of space. Like they're doing kind of quasi-developmental stuff.
Certainly thinking about animal behavior and behavior modeling. Right. That's cool.
Okay. So I mean, I think this is kind of a nice overview. I mean, there's so much at NeurIPS that you can do. There are a lot of papers I'm not going to get into. You can go to the schedule to find that. But yeah, maybe we can. I don't know if people want to look through the schedule and find something that's really interesting, we can talk about it, because they usually publish all the papers on archive, and so they're accessible.
And I was saying how embarrassing it is, right? That Cold Spring Harbor has got a meeting like exactly the same time.
Yeah.
And it's the absolute opposite of openness, like transparency, everything. It's the opposite. They give you the titles of posters, and that's it.
Yeah, just
right.
Just come to the meeting.
Title of first author, and no transparent. These were here's the reviews that how did these posters get selected?
Yeah, definitely.
And how much of this is going to be recorded, and how much of this, are these posters going to be available before opposite? Anyway, it's I hope you all take a page from these ML conferences in terms of their openness.
Yeah, the bio conferences are usually less transparent. Like the ones from the lab, like from Cold Spring Harbor, is really hard to decipher sometimes. Like what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, they sometimes I think they run it like it's a business. Sure, if you pay $800, you can. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, NeurIPS collects their fee too. It's not.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay, so that's good. So I wanted to kind of finish up here with go back to the neuro AI stuff we were talking about last time. So I did a overview of neuro AI. It was like 2 weeks ago now, And I wanted to kind of go through a little bit more follow up on that. So there is this. This was published in the Transmitter, which is this blog or magazine online of. It's very much neuroscience oriented. So
it's the new Quanta.
Yeah, new Quanta. Yeah. So this is Anthony Zador, who's done a lot of stuff in computational neuroscience, and he's musing on NeuroAI here. So NeuroAI, a field born from the symbiosis between neuroscience and AI. So this is his take on this. As the history of this nascent discipline reveals, neuroscience has inspired advances in artificial intelligence, and AI in turn has provided a testing ground for models in neuroscience, accelerating progress in both fields. So that's one thing we don't have in the NeurIPS conference yet. We may have this in the future, is this sort of how how is sort of AI providing a testing ground for models in neuroscience. It's interesting because when you talk within NeuroAI, a lot of people, a lot of neuroscientists are skeptical of what AI has to offer neuroscience. And I don't know if that's just kind of like biological snobbery, which is not a term, but I just made it up, or if it's like there really isn't that much insight. But it's interesting because like AI people have no problem taking things from the brain, but maybe it's seen as like, computational models are seen as kind of like, crackpots sort of theories, and yeah, there's a view maybe that it's not empirical in some way. So that's kind of how I've just noticed that sort of take on it. So he's kind of giving his view of NeuroAI. You can actually listen to it if you want instead of reading it. That's a cool feature. Well, anyways, so NeuroAI, which is this portmanteau between neuroscience and AI, and of course we know that that relationship is bidirectional but not equal necessarily. He talks about the Brain Initiative, which we talked about in our recap of the NeuroAI workshop. And so they're going to have a whole series of essays on NeuroAI here. So we'll maybe come back to those later. He talks about the coevolution of AI and neuroscience and the ongoing symbiosis between these fields that have created and continues to form a virtuous cycle. So first, it relates to the application of AI to neuroscience, specifically the use of neural networks as computational models of the brain, which offer a concrete and rigorous way to test otherwise potentially fuzzy hypotheses about how collections of neurons compute. This goes back to this thing I was talking about, where some neuroscientists don't feel that AI has as much utility as AI people think neuroscience has. And if you think about like how we've applied these computational models to the brain, think about what cognitive science was doing maybe 40 years ago or 30 years ago, where that's how sort of connectionist models got started and got famous, was they're applying those connectionist models to cognition. So like, a lot of people would, there was like a burst of papers in that era in the 80s and 90s where people would take connectionist models and model things in the brain, model cognition in the brain. So it's not just, questions about neuroanatomy, it's like the mind, which is being modeled in this way. And of course, people stopped doing that after a while because it was maybe of limited utility. But I don't know the full history of like that burst of papers where people were applying connectionism to cognition, but it'd be interesting to go back to that and look at what actually kind of happened. Did people stop doing it because it fell out of fashion, or because it was not really giving good answers, or what?
I think it's around the time when things like Actar and SOAR and other models kind of made their first, hit the scene first. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was, yeah. I mean, it was kind of, that was early computational cognitive science.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
but yeah, it would be, and that's, again, like we don't, like I don't see a section on that at NeurIPS.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. That would be
Um,
maybe something more for the CogSci conference, but I don't think they cover that either. I
Yeah,
don't think
well,
that's a,
and there is now a great computational cognitive science conference now, right?
Yeah.
So that is a thing. Anyway, sorry.
yeah,
It does kind of go both ways, though, right? I mean, I remember when Tony Zader had he was the first author on this paper that was kind of the first neuro AI kind of white paper.
yeah,
You remember this? Yeah,
I think so.
and um, and there were these like DeepMind people being like, "This is silly.
yeah,
We're not taking anything. We're not taking anything from neuro."
right. Yeah, well, yeah,
Right.
there are purists in that direction too. Yeah,
And yeah, that if anything, like, it's we're taking things from physics,
yeah,
and occasionally giving it a narrative that talks about what it's inspired by.
yeah.
But this is, it's more akin to like condensed matter physics.
Yeah,
than it
yeah.
is to neuro. Anyway,
Yeah, at best, giving life to your precious neuroscience.
right.
New life, yeah. Is articulated by Richard Feynman's famous dictum, that which I cannot create, I do not understand. And so we can maybe create networks that give us some information about how the brain performs computations. And then neuro AI refers to the adaptation of insights of neuroscience to build better AI systems. So we want to build artificial systems that can do things a human can do. And those two research programs are kind of what we want to talk about. And ideally, it should form this reinforcing feedback loop that accelerates progress in both fields. So there's this. So AI can also be used to find structure in large neuroscience data sets. So this Deep Lab Cut program, which is from the Mackenzie Mathis Lab, enables researchers to automatically track animal movements. Those are just, it's just one example of how this symbiosis works. And so it kind of goes through the history of computing and how there's always been this interest in approximating biology. If you go back to Hebbian learning or the Pitts-McCullough neuron or Rosenblatt's work on the perceptron, these are all just kind of like, either analogies from biology, or you're talking about some sort of electronic brain or something like that. The perceptron, of course, being a perception-based machine. And then, this idea here, Marvin Minsky and Seymour Papper's 1969 book chapter, Perceptrons, is exposed the limitations of single-layer perceptrons and triggered the first neural network winter. The core neuroscience-inspired idea that synapses are the plastic elements or free parameters of a neural network has remained absolutely central to modern AI. So this is where, the whole kind of the core of what modern AI is based on the synapse and sort of an analogy of the synapse. How do we model that rather than like, neurons interacting? The weights of those interactions are actually like analogous to synapses. And that's kind of what he's getting at here. So, I mean, they're very broad analogies. And of course, that's where we can bring in a lot of neuro-inspired stuff. Aside from like this neuro-AI relationship, kind of working out models of the biology of these components.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, everybody should read Grace Lindsay's book.
Yeah, I know.
It's absolutely worthwhile. covering all that in depth.
Yeah. So, and then this kind of talks about how there were discoveries in neuroscience that kind of parallel some of the things going on in AI. Of course, those are maybe uh, again, they're analogies. They're not really like approximating, like, for example, convolutional neural networks were inspired by Hubel and Weisel's model of the visual cortex. But what is it? What is it really? Is it doing something similar, or is it really kind of capturing what happens in the visual cortex? Is really kind of an open question, and there maybe if we had more experimental methods, we could get at that question more directly.
Yeah. But there does seem to be some really interesting overlap between what the brain's doing and these systems.
Yeah, and definitely.
And because Freebrum's books, I mean, he draws a lot from those models in his visual processing text. And so I saw, I got those presentations before, ImageNet and things like that, and it was really, I think it was the parallels were pretty striking.
Yeah.
It's the next paragraph that I take some umbrage with.
Well, it's this one here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is another home run in the story of reinforcement learning. Is the game playing engine AlphaZero. More recently, the concept of dropout has gained prominence in artificial neural networks. This technique, in which individual neurons in the artificial network are randomly deactivated during training to prevent overfitting, draws inspiration. This is again inspiration from the brain's use of stochastic processes, which are, multitude,
but yeah. They didn't draw inspiration from they were trying to make their models work.
Right.
Like if there was inspiration, it was they were inspired to try and tell a story afterwards.
Post hoc explanation
for why this makes sense and doesn't look like they're just fiddling with knobs.
Yeah.
Right, because it's like again, if you remember, it's funny. I remember 2016.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago.
like it wasn't that long ago, right? But I mean, pre 2016. So we're talking about between 2012 and 2016.
Yeah.
It's a little time, and it was this thing where it was just like, hey, don't just keep it running. You want to stop the training early,
right?
Like why wouldn't you just let it run?
Yeah.
And it was just this overfitting problem, like which again, like widely known in neural, as being a neural network problem,
right?
And so yeah, like to say that it has anything to do with like synaptic pruning, it's and I bet you could have a completely energy based, a kind of like simulated annealing story, where it's like it's just a physics story for why you want to do this.
Yeah, you could.
Right? No brain analogy needed required.
Yeah. So by mimicking the occasional misfiring of neurons, and this kind of brings up also, if you go to biological, like computational,
I mean,
occasionally, yeah.
Like stick with one story.
Yeah.
What is this?
So this brings up a point about like what people are doing in computational biology, which is like they're trying to not build models like neural network models, but they're trying to approximate the process that's going on in like different biological systems. So if you're going to model stochastic processes in biological systems, there are techniques that people use in computational biology, and they actually try to fit that to the data. And of course, you run the risk in that kind of enterprise of like picking the wrong mechanism, or using a mathematical tool that doesn't necessarily map to what the nervous system is doing. So yeah, you're right about like stochastic processes are stochastic processes. It's a random process that you could model with like some variance term in a differential equation, or model it with some sort of random walk or something like that. And it isn't necessarily dropping out neurons, although if you drop a node out of a network, it has an effect on the network and how information moves through the network. But that's not necessarily the same thing. So it's like if we don't want to collapse too many things into sort of an explanation, or collapse too many explanations into doing some sort of technique.
Yeah. I find that particular paragraph incoherent.
Well, yeah.
It's like I think he's going to start talking about reinforcement learning, and then it's talking about training. And then it's talking about misfiring. It's just like I've completely lost what the story is.
Yeah.
But it's still good. It's still good.
Yeah, it is. And this I think highlights some of the issues in neuro AI, which is that when we take like a complex system like the brain, we're just trying to find a representation of what it's doing, or the dynamics especially. And that's the whole enterprise, is finding the right parts that mean the most, explain those variants.
Absolutely right. I mean, it's a classic case of you don't want the map to equal the territory,
right?
Yeah. Right, and so but stick with one pen. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the editing advice.
Yeah.
Like what?
Yeah. So I mean, this and he goes through a couple more examples here. So that's the whole article pretty much. And of course, there are some practical and ethical issues that really need to be explored. And we talked about these last time. Of course, that's an incomplete list, but there are a whole host of open questions in NeuroAI that we can look to.
Did you already cover Patrick Minolt's NeuroAI for AI safety paper?
No, I don't think we've covered that.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's something.
I highly recommend it.
Okay.
Not well. To take my own advice and stick with the map metaphor. You're gonna need a big map.
Yeah, you need a bigger map.
Like if you, or the famous Jaws, we're gonna need a bigger boat, right? You're gonna talk about the brain, like get a comfy chair,
right?
Because it's gonna take a while. It's not a pithy tweet, and so he. Yeah, I mean, I think maybe again, this is a very short article for Simon's Foundation to popularize to do science communication, right? So Patrick Minolt's paper. I mean, he's just first author with a bunch of people, but they're really trying to cover a lot of areas in depth, and then say like, hey, studying the brain requires using ML AI, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
and that there's lots of loopiness,
right.
and there's lots of scales that things are happening at, and he just tries to do a real overview of a lot of them that I thought was really helpful in kind of showing you where the frontier areas were.
Okay,
Yeah, I thought it was good, and yeah, I'd be happy to. This guy from that just came out of Mark Woolwich's lab in Oxford moved over to Oakland, Berkeley, and he was the first one pointing me to it. Was just like, hey, we should spend time on this, and I'm gonna take off pretty soon and go to the Foresight Vision Weekend.
Okay, oh, good.
And like Conrad Cording and some people off that, I think that first Neuro AI paper are going to be there.
Okay, wow, all right.
yeah. And anyway, but that would be a cool, I think a cool one to cover. And okay. I actually posted that paper on the Organoid Intelligence Slack.
Okay.
Saying, because I was just like, Hayden doesn't have anything to say about organoid intelligence. Like brilliant Nobel Prize winner, not his thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think, yeah. Anyway. I'll stop there.
All right, yeah, and I'll continue on, and if you need to go, it's okay. I'll be on the recording. So
yeah.
So we talked about this. Is this the paper? Okay, we talked about this transmitter paper. I have a screenshot from last time. I had these screenshots that were from the session at the NIH, and this is so this is from this paper. Aimone, this is Brad Aimone, who's the person who I'm going to talk about his paper in a minute, but this is called A Roadmap for Reaching the Potential Brain-Derived Computing. So this is published in Advanced Intelligent Systems. And so this is a roadmap that he developed. So this is the evolution of artificial intelligence since behaviorism. So this is back when we had, psychology was dominated by behaviorism, and of course, behaviorism provided the inspiration for reinforcement learning, and this was before the cognitive revolution. So this is really interesting how he links sort of artificial intelligence, and of course, the early years of artificial intelligence with behaviorism, which of course at the time was the predominant psychological theory or a psychological approach. So if we go back to like pre-1940, we have people like Pavlov, Skinner, Baderstein, and Hall, and these are all studies, behavioral studies that kind of focused on learning. And then there was this sort of inspiration from that world, from at the time neuroscience, which was a lot of neuroanatomy and trying to localize things. And of course, we had behavioral studies like Pavlov and Skinner and things like that. And this feeds into a couple of areas. So artificial neural nets, statistical machine learning, and dynamical machine learning. And so artificial neural nets, of course, then were inspired by this pre-1940 work, resulting in the McCullough and Pitts work in 1943 when they proposed this biophysically inspired neuron. And so that leads to the perceptron of Rosenblatt in 1958. And of course, then that was sort of discussed as having limitations in the 60s, and that led to an AI winter. You then had further development in statistical machine learning, where a lot of the ideas from behaviorism led to the decision trees of Hunt, and then in dynamical machine learning and the reinforcement learning, first proposed by Minsky in 1961. So that reinforcement learning actually goes back to Minsky, early versions of it, and then Sutton popularized later versions of it. Then you have things from 1940 to 1960. So you have Hebb's work in 1949, and that was, of course, Hebbian learning, which focuses on the synapse. Hubel and Weisel's work in 1959, and that focused on neuronal representations. And that leads us to the Fukushima work of 1975, which is the cognitron, which then led to the Hope field nets. And it sort of led us down two paths, one towards temporal coding and reservoir computing and population representations, and another path characterized by LeCun's work and deep learning of Hinton and other people as well. Schmidt-Huber's in there as well. So we have this sort of artificial neural nets trajectory. Then we have the statistical machine learning trajectory, which is where we had from decision trees, we went to Bayesian nets, Judea Pearl's work on that, Bayesian nets and causality, support vector machines by Cortez and Vapnik in the 90s, and then random forests in 2001, and it continues on. So we have these statistical approaches to machine learning, inspired actually by the behaviorists. And then the dynamical machine learning, so reinforcement learning, the reinforcement learning of Minsky, Markov models proposed by Rabner in 1989. Sutton proposes, an updated version of reinforcement learning in 1998. We have dynamic Bayesian nets by Murphy in 2002, and on and on and on, where we kind of move forward through these using dynamical representations, dynamical systems that require you to model things as a transitions between states and transitions between other types of constructs over time. So you have these three different branches, all coming from this pre-1940s behaviorism. And then in neuroscience, of course, things are moving on as we go from the work in the 60s, work in the 70s, work in the 80s, and then right around the time of O'Keefe in 1993, which was, of course, the stuff on place cells and other types of representations in hippocampus. We get this temporal coding, which is influencing reservoir computing. We get things in the 2000s, population representations, which are feeding into artificial neural nets more. And so this is a nice, I think, one slide summary of this. There's probably more here that we could draw out, but this is a nice, model of this sort of these trajectories. So this paper here is the paper this comes from. This is James Aimone's, James B. Aimone. This is an advanced intelligence systems. So this talks about neuromorphic computing specifically. So neuromorphic computing is a critical future technology for the computing industry, but it is yet to achieve its promise and has struggled to establish a cohesive research community. A large part of the challenge is that full realization of the potential brain inspiration requires advances in both device hardware, computing architectures, and algorithms. So it's not just about the software and about like building a network that you can represent things on. It's actually building the hardware that is more sort of amenable to the biological metaphor than the von Neumann architecture, which of course isn't necessarily built in any sort of biological metaphor. So this is where, where people are building neuromorphic hardware specifically because you can't necessarily represent what the brain is doing on a von Neumann architecture. So the simultaneously development across technology scales is unprecedented in the computing field, so it prevents a lot of unique challenges. This article presents a strategy framed by market and policy pressures for moving past these current technological and cultural hurdles to realize its full impact across technology, achieving the full potential of brain-derived algorithms, as well as post-complementary metal oxide semiconductors, or CMOS. Scaling neuromorphic hardware requires approximately balancing the near-term opportunities of deep learning applications with the long-term potential of less understood opportunities in neural computing. So this kind of goes over the marketplace, the technology, evolution. So basically, yeah, like Morgan was saying, there's a lot of focus on energy consumption, both in terms of the input data, but also the cost of energy consumption. So we have this convergence of Moore's law and big data, where Moore's law is keeping up with the ability to, where if you get smaller and smaller processors, meaning that you have more and more computational capacity, you can only make those transistors so small before you run into the limits of the quantum scale. And so that's where you start to have this maybe need for a different type of hardware. And so if we want higher and higher levels of performance, we're going to have to move to a different hardware paradigm. And so, we've kind of reached Moore's law in a way already, so we need to kind of investigate some of these new technologies. And so there is a role for brain inspiration here. Of course, we can look at like how to overcome Moore's law through brain inspiration, but we have to do that at the hardware level. And then, of course, if we do it at the hardware level, we need software to keep up and to take some of the things that we've been doing on von Neumann architectures and map them to some of these neural neural pieces of hardware, but also build software that's more sort of amenable to that neuronal metaphor. So we're doing a lot of things like Bayesian methods and causal graphs. Can we do these in a neural architecture? So there's something highlighted here. This lack of direct influence of neuroscience in modern AI represents an opportunity. So we should be able to use neuroscience at least to move forward some of our computing techniques and improve those to build these kind of AI systems. So he proposes a roadmap following 5 stages. 1, design flexible low-powered AI implementations using spiking neuromorphic hardware. So it's like spiking neural networks, but in the hardware as well. Extend reach of neural hardware by designing efficient spiking neuronal algorithms for 1, which is this first point. So we basically need to design flexible low-power implementations, but also on that neural hardware, design efficient spiking neural algorithms. The third point is design hybrid analog spiking architectures for biological scale algorithms. So we need things that are sort of at the scale of what the brain does instead of like small processing units that are disconnected. So we need to focus on building networks, maybe at the hardware level, but also at the software level. 4, achieve more powerful AI capabilities by implementing brain-derived neural algorithms. And then 5, look to exotic hardware approaches that achieve full neuromorphic capabilities. Again, this is like, kind of part drawing together the tools that we have and part visionary. So we don't really have all the tools in place now, but we have some, and we can use that for the inspiration. So, he proposes a couple things. He talks about the current state of the neuromorphic hardware community. We have CMOS circuits. We have different types of logic that we need to use. We really need to do more research to get scalable production suitable systems in place. These need to be analog, not digital. And so we need to kind of figure out how to do that. It talks about spiking neuromorphic algorithms. And this is actually a nice figure showing the relationship between programmable hardware and the algorithms. So we have GPUs that run deep learning algorithms. We can take those deep learning algorithms and port them to spiking neuromorphic chips. We can then have spiking algorithms that sort of approximate networks. We can maybe put those in hybrid analog digital neuromorphic chips. So the spiking neuromorphic chips would be digital. We want to kind of approximate some of the analog features of the brain as well. And then we want to have these truly brain-derived algorithms, which are maybe spiking algorithms that are inspired by deep learning algorithms. It also includes some of these analog processes and other types of processes in the brain. And he has a map here of like the hippocampus, where you have CA1 and CA3, the dentate gyrus, and the entorhinal cortex. So you have spiking neurons within those boxes, and then connections between those boxes. And then, that's how we at least have a circuit of the hippocampus. We can approximate maybe like one brain region in that way. And then there are digital processes or analog processes within that network that operates at different scales. And so then you can have these kind of truly brain-derived algorithms that then give us this unknown future for potential, like, different types of 3D architecture, novel types of devices, etc., that leverage that the capability that the hardware and the software unlocks. So that's what he's talking about here. He's talking about things like continuous valued neural networks, things like analog computation. So these are things that a von Neumann architecture may not be well suited for. And so it's hard to really kind of put that out there, as a something you can benchmark. But you can look at some of these things and see how they behave, either through simulation or through, running them on these non-scaled neuromorphic platforms. Okay, so then he gives them challenges for spiking neuromorphic hardware, some challenges for hybrid analog spiking neuromorphic hardware, and then this is a kind of a cheesy diagram, but basically showing this link between neuroscience and computing, where we have this narrow transfer of knowledge right now, and where we want this highway between the two fields that enables greater knowledge transfer. Okay, so that's all we have there. I don't think he has that figure that I showed from the conference in the paper, but that's basically the idea there.
Yeah. I brought up the Northbridge. So Northbridge and Southbridge are, computer systems engineering terms for the kind of like motherboard layout.
Yeah.
Right. So the computer being actually quite a diverse set of other processors in addition to the CPU, right? And so Northbridge deals with you're bridging a number of, I don't know if you want to call them microcontrollers and CPUs, but certainly a lot of differently designed chips. And then Southbridge would be your connections to, again, a number of other chips, but mostly chipsets involved in sensor processing, right? And which, I think also has its place in this kind of neuro AI discussion. And it's like, sensory systems and cameras, et cetera, have their own set of issues. But just again thinking, comments that I made on the organoid intelligence Slack, like who's working on the kind of north bridge of bio to artificial, or bio to silicon, and what would it involve? And I like that we talk about neuromorphic computing, because it is an interesting area, and I kind of felt like he would probably gain from looking more at neuromorphic systems than say some of the traditional AI conferences.
Yeah.
Again, just pointing out how kind of how Hinton's kind of work is not really relevant to neuro computing. But maybe so one, just like kind of speaking to that transmitter issue, where it's just like these are more about the narratives that we tell right? Like you could have a discussion of what are called neuromorphic chips, and we could call them. So we could talk about something else, right? That relates to kind of like point processes, or binary neural nets or something like that, right? And give it a narrative that relates to, I don't know, gene regulatory networks or something like that. Like and I liked this comment from Michael Levin on this recent podcast interview that he did, where he said you know, I forget if it's him or his lab jokes about this, but he's like, you can take any neuro paper, you can replace, search and replace every time neuron appears, replace it with cell, and every time milliseconds appears, replace it with seconds, and you'd have a developmental paper, like you'd have an embryology paper, and he, the point being that, like, to that point, right, that you could have a gene regulatory network narrative about what we call spiking neural network neuromorphic chips, and that it gives you the same result, or it gives you the same action and the same complexity, and it's just it again would be perhaps derived from a different time scale, but so one that's super interesting, or like, again, it says something about, like, these are stories that we've overlaid on technology,
right,
and not necessarily the representing the technology itself. And then two, like, again, like, how useful are how useful is it to even think about neuromorphic computing if what you're really interested in is, how do I pass work to a biological system, get computation done on that data, and then pass it back, right? Like how little we've thought about that issue, just even data IO, right? And how, and again, like, pointing at the, I think it's Gu there there in the Midwest. Sorry, not to group you guys all together, but in your neighboring state of Indiana.
Okay.
Like, reservoir computing is an approach that doesn't require biological system, and so I pointed out that Adam Adamatsky has a new paper on reservoir computing with biological colloids,
Okay.
and it's just like I know that biological is in that name,
Yeah.
or I know biological is in that title, but, like, it's a colloid, right?
Right.
Like we could make So yes, there's some subtleties to its composition, but that is not living matter.
Yeah.
Right, and it really speaks to reservoir computing as being a way to get computing without tackling the actual key questions of, how do I interface with biology, and like, past data, and like these kind of, I mean, I have trouble not falling into von Neumann definitions of computing.
I think we all do, because it's like
I think we all do, right? And that those, if we want to make that bridge, right, that we need, this is why I think synthetic biology is one of these areas where it will be a key part of organoid intelligence, or whatever you want to call this area.
Yeah.
Just because it will be as much about engineering biology as it is about kind of neuromorphic systems, right? So it could be that neuromorphic systems are one of the kind of interface technologies that we use because like spiking is to some degree a language that we know biological neural networks speak, but they won't be the actual implementation itself, right? I mean, it's still, there's still this, I want to say this real gap. I mean, we are fully air gapped from the biology at this point, because yeah.
So yeah, I had 2
But I
points.
think
Yeah. One is that I mean, synthetic biology uses a lot of sort of von Neumann metaphors as well. At least, well, maybe not von Neumann metaphors, but it uses like this idea that biology, or that DNA is information processing, and to some extent that's what they do. They implement that principle, and they bring it back to like saying, okay, if DNA is like an information processing thing, or it's holding information, and say like transcription is processing information, we can implement that in a simple circuit and show that that works and manipulate it. So you're really kind of making it more experimentally sound. But on the other hand, you're making assumptions about what the biological systems are doing, and you're just showing like, okay, these are discrete states that produce something as an output. Is that what does that mean? Is that information, or is that like, maybe we need a new information theory for synthetic biology or something? And then the other point I was going to make was that, when we talk about the Adamansky work on colloids, there is actually, instead of like the thing you were talking about with Levin, where you can replace kind of the neuro approach with the embryology approach, people also, in development, they talk about soft active materials. So basically, you can use a model intended for something like colloids and describe a biological system. And they use the same type of, they can replace certain words, and it can become like a development paper, that type of.
It is being, colloids and slime molds and things like that being just, again, on a much slower time scale.
Right. It's just a difference in time scale.
Right. And I mean, I think some of the best plant intelligence papers is just like, our only problem with understanding plant intelligence is that they're going so slow.
Yeah.
like we need to slow down and realize that the deep lab cut of for plant intelligence is a camera that's running for like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And for sure. Yeah, I the point, or certainly like I'm kind of using synthetic biology as a name for definitely the kind of stuff that you're describing, but also for like optogenetics and things like that.
Oh, right, yeah.
I mean, just where, again, like the tagline of, or, sometimes people say synthetic biology, and sometimes they say engineering biology, right?
Yeah.
So instead of, like flipping that around, and that's kind of the I think of optogenetics as like that.
Yeah.
Is like engineering biology, right?
Yeah.
Is making it amenable to our our agency, right? And but I think it's still really key to follow like neuromorphic computing, nanofabrication, and a lot of these things, just in terms of, you'll want to understand, you'll want to understand things at that molecular cellular level, and to be able to start to engineer it, right?
Yeah. So yeah, universality for the win, I guess, because you have like these common processes over these different systems. And,
yeah. Well, or let's say, Michael Levin for the win, in the sense of, multi-scale, mind everywhere.
Yeah. Or I guess what would Levin do? Because we were talking about.
Yeah. Something we should be asking ourselves every day.
Okay, well, I think that's enough for today. Thanks for attending, and have a good week. We'll have our last meeting of the year next week. All right.
Sounds good. All right.
Thanks. Bye.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Okay.